Hi everyone, thank you for joining us all today. I'm Josie, I'm the Marketing and Recruitment Coordinator for On Purpose. Just as we're waiting for everyone to join us, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat and give your name and location where you're joining us from. It's nice to feel a bit more connected with everyone who's joining, even if I can't see your faces. And just a quick note before we start, we will have a live Q&A session at the end of our discussion. So feel free to throw in your questions as they arise into the chat function or to the Q&A function. And Sarah, who's here from On Purpose team as well, will be here to monitor that throughout. And for those new to On Purpose, we run leadership programs that help people change the world through the work they do and the lives they lead. And our flagship associate program is an intensive year-long program that develops people to become leaders of transformational change. And I'm delighted to be co-hosting this webinar today with Hilary and Escape City. I'll just pass over to Hilary quickly just for a few words before we jump into today's topic.
Fab, thank you so much, Josie. We're at Escape City delighted to be partnering to co-host this live webinar with On Purpose. There's just so much meaningful alignment between the mission of On Purpose and Escape City, and to be able to hear people's stories about their journeys to impact is such a great part of what we do. So yeah, really happy to be here. And for anybody who's not familiar with Escape City, we're the UK's leading career change platform. So we offer a purpose-driven jobs board along with programs and courses to help people build fulfilling careers and do work that genuinely does matter to them. I'm Hilary, I'm Head of Marketing at Escape City, and yeah, really happy to be here. Thanks so much, Josie, for organising.
Thanks so much, Hilary. So going on to why we're all here today. So like many of you, I grew up totally fascinated by the natural world, and I absolutely love being out in it, get my peace from it. But working in the impact-driven space and being aware of all the environmental challenges that we're facing, I found myself at times feeling anxious, scared, frustrated, and really quite sad about what's happening to it, as well as all that means for us and society. And I know I'm not alone in feeling this way, and I believe that's what's brought us all here together today. So we're here because I think we want to learn a bit more about how we can navigate these feelings and ways to transform these concerns into empowering and impactful actions. Which brings me onto our guest today, who's going to help guide us through these questions. I'm so pleased to welcome Heather Lynch. As a transformation and climate coach, Heather dedicates her expertise to supporting change makers to find happiness, more happiness and fulfillment, and to have a more meaningful impact in the world. And I know Heather as she's an alumni of our associate program, and we actually first met in person at a climate event last year, and we've then since seen each other at various other climate events since then. And since following her work, I've been deeply inspired by what she does and her mission, and I'm really grateful to have her join us here today. So with that, let's dive into today's discussion. So Heather, could you tell us a bit about your journey and what's led you to becoming a coach, first of all?
Yeah, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here and to see everyone joining. And even that we have like a word, eco-anxiety, that we all can kind of come around and want to transform the way that we feel about the world in order to show up in a better way. I think when I was going through the depths of it, I didn't really understand eco-anxiety or understand the emotional impact of it, or really understand how to process it. So having spaces like this is amazing. And there's so many tools and people who are working on supporting people on eco-anxiety, that it's great that you've been able to bring people together on this. So thank you very much. And yeah, I'll be sharing a lot from my experience and what I've kind of been through, what I've learned, what kind of works for me, and some things will work for people, other things won't. And we have Q&A at the end, so we'd love to hear your thoughts and questions too. And yeah, so my journey, I started interested in international development. So I studied economics and international development. I went and volunteered abroad for a couple of months in Tanzania and Sierra Leone, and was very much focused on like, okay, this is what I want to do, this is how I want to contribute to the world. And so went and joined PwC's consulting grad scheme, and worked there for 5 years, mainly in their international development team, and worked on aid projects for the government around impact investing and climate change, and then moved a bit more into ESG and impact investing, and helping investors to look at the way that they're investing. Then I felt like I wanted to be closer to the impact and to really feel like I was making a difference, and I wasn't sure that corporate life was for me. So I found On Purpose and did that and loved it. And it was kind of my entry into kind of inner work. You get a mentor and a coach as part of it, and it kind of helped me overcome a lot of things that were holding me back, or helped me realize like really what's important to me, what are my values, what's holding me back, what are my limiting beliefs, and as well as opening me up to like, oh, okay, there's so much out here that I can do and so many different ways that I can make an impact. And then I went on to work at one of my placements, which was Oddbox, which is a fruit and veg box, which is all about fighting food waste. And I was their sustainability manager, then head of impact and sustainability. And my role was kind of split into embedding sustainability into the organization, making it a core part of the strategy and kind of embedding it into how all the teams worked. And then the other part was more around our mission of fighting food waste. How do we better understand food waste, why it exists, how we can contribute to it as an organization, how do we better, and that kind of got me into systems thinking of actually like, oh, we need to understand like the root causes of food waste and tackle it there and kind of contribute to solving it from that perspective, which then led me kind of onto where I am now, which is kind of set up my own coaching practice. And I think there's 3 things that kind of got me into that. So I think one was having my own coach and therapist who I worked with for a while, and they just kind of completely transformed me, how I felt about myself, like understanding myself way better, understanding what was important to me, what it was like to like who I was authentically and who I'd been conditioned to be from society, and what were the beliefs that were holding me back, like not feeling good enough or not feeling capable enough, smart enough. And it totally changed the way that I viewed myself and what I was capable of. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, I'd love to be able to do this for other people. And then I also did a leadership course when I was at Oddbox, and they did a lot of coaching and coaching skills, psychological safety, and how to get the most out of people and to empower people. And that like then changed how I acted in my role and brought in more of a coaching style, and just like it completely changed how things happened way faster because people were kind of owning projects, and I was much happier because it was kind of, I wasn't trying to manage and do things all the time. You know, taking on that more coach mindset really helped me and helped like the company to achieve more on what we were doing. And then I also did a systems thinking course with the School of Systems Change, and it's like a 6-month program called Basecamp, and it just totally blew my mind in terms of understanding that like the root cause of a lot of problems are around the way that we think and our psychology and our beliefs around the world, our assumptions, our views of the world. And I was like, if we change the way that we think and we have like a deeper level of awareness, then we can actually kind of contribute to the root causes of the problems. Because a lot of what's happening in the world is kind of we're treating the symptoms and like the results of things, but actually until we get like deep inside into our mindset and the way that we think and actually challenge the way things are and kind of come back to the relationship we have with ourselves, and then there's a risk that we might continue to do that. So that then also altogether, I was like, coaching makes so much sense, because you're kind of supporting people on their self-awareness journey, kind of meeting them wherever they're at and wherever they want to go to kind of transform and reach their full potential, and then also to have the kind of impact that they want to have in the world.
Great, thanks for sharing a bit of kind of what's brought you here now, and kind of through that journey, what could you talk us a little bit more about what your personal vision and mission is now?
Yeah, so my vision is around like a world where people live in harmony with themselves, with others, and with nature. And I talk about like a conscious transition to a regenerative future, and like that consciousness is kind of what I was talking about, awareness, that like deeper level of awareness within ourselves, within what's happening in the systems, beliefs we have about the world, like bringing a deeper level of consciousness into what we've been conditioned to believe, and to believe the world needs to be like, and how we need to be, and what it means to make an impact. And then a regenerative future is about kind of giving back more than we take. It's seeing that we are part of nature, we are part of the living system, and we are all one, and we can rejuvenate and regenerate nature through regenerating ourselves. And that kind of, for me, it all starts with us. It's kind of like the relationship you have with yourself is the relationship you have with the world. So if we love ourselves, we can know how to love the world. And if we can work on that kind of relationship, then we can create a really beautiful world. I think a lot of stuff right now is kind of focused on fear and, oh no, what's going to happen in the world, and it's all doom. But like, if we can kind of work on the relationship we have with ourselves, and kind of cultivating more of that love and being in harmony and peace with other people, then we can work towards like a better future for all beings, where kind of everyone is looked after.
I love that. And I love the kind of sentiment of the regenerative future. I think for a while we've been stuck in a sustainable kind of, the word sustainability, which, means to sustain, what actually, if we go back to Indigenous wisdom and stuff, that's all about actually giving back so that we can, continue living and sort of stop just keeping our head above the water. So yeah, thank you for that. And let's see, before we go into, what we can actually do about eco-anxiety, could you talk us through what it is, what eco-anxiety is, and also your experience with it?
Yeah. So I googled a definition. It's like the chronic fear of environmental doom. And I think it's like the emotional reaction that we have to what's happening in the world. And for me, it's around all the crises. Like, it comes up for me in like anything that's kind of happening in the world. Like, you call it the poly crisis or the meta crisis. It's kind of like all these issues are interconnected. So whether it's climate change, biodiversity loss, soil degradation, like injustice or inequality, water pollution, like others as well, it's kind of all of those issues, and then our emotional action to those, which can be like a mixture of feelings. They're kind of like, there's a climate wheel, which it's on my LinkedIn and on my blog, but if people haven't seen it, and the main buckets are like anger, fear, and sadness, and within them there's different emotions like guilt and shame and loneliness and frustration and overwhelm, despair, anxiety, panic. There's a whole mix of emotions that you can kind of feel around them, around what's happening. And just to acknowledge kind of my position and my privilege, I live in Surrey, like a nice life. I haven't really been impacted by the impacts of climate change. And there are some people that are actually living in it and suffering with it now, or their families are. So I don't have that kind of experience to share with people. So I invite, if anyone does, it may look very different to what I'm kind of talking about, which is thinking and knowing about what's happening in the world versus actually having to manage it. So maybe if anyone has experience in the Q&A, they can bring that and just see if it varies in any ways they've learned to manage it. And then just a bit of context about me, so that you know kind of where I've come from and how I've kind of managed it. So I'm like a very empathetic person. Like, I very much feel the pain of other people. Like, you'll see me in like a swimming pool or a lake, and I'm just holding like my hands like this because I've got like the bugs and the insects that are drowning, and I'm kind of just like holding them until they fly off. And like, I just really can't struggle to deal with any kind of suffering. And then I have quite a strong tendency towards anxiety and like thinking about the future. And I never really learned how to deal with emotions and like name them and process them and have an ability to manage. So I feel like all of that, and then you put me, like I just worked and learned about it for 15 years, means that I had quite like a strong emotional reaction to what's happening in the world. And for me, it's been quite a gradual thing. I think for some people, they kind of get hit by something that they read or the news, and it's been like a lot of moments where it's kind of the awareness has like deepened in terms of understanding what's happening in the world, and then my emotional reaction to that as well. So, and I see it in two kind of buckets. So one is kind of learning about what's happening in the world, and whether that's a disaster that's happened, kind of onset changes of, you know, like how much things are decreasing or how much things are increasing, and then predictions for the future and where things are going to be. And having that kind of knowledge and information, whether it's from news articles, reading reports, or watching documentaries, however it might be, like I absorbed a lot of that information. I think working in sustainability as well, you feel like you need to know everything and be an expert in everything. So you kind of take on that, or I took on that, like needing to know a lot about what was happening. And I think two instances which I just very much remember, like one was watching David Attenborough's Planetary Boundaries, and just those like, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but those like red people like walking out of the earth is just like we're like exceeding all the planetary boundaries, and it's like the collapse of civilization is like it's so heavy. And I just remember crying during that, and like I cried myself to sleep after, and I was just like, I just felt really powerless and hopeless. And I read a book called Less is More, and that really hit me, like grief really hit me really strongly then. I think because I worked in international development, it was very much about supporting like the global south to develop, and this book kind of just made me see things in such a different light, because you're just like, the growth and the impact on people in the global south is going to be, it just was so unfair that I was, yeah. And it was about the time the IPCC report came out and other stuff was happening at work, and I was just really like quite debilitated. Like I couldn't really do much. I wasn't really functioning that well. And that's one part of it. And then the other part is the kind of everyday feelings that come up around feeling guilty and feeling like you should be doing sustainable things. And, you know, we've kind of been taught, and anyone who cares, I'm sure people that are here will know a lot about what to do and be trying to do their best to actually like make a difference, and, you know, reduce food waste, recycle, try not to fly as much, try not to consume as much, like all these things we learn. And with that comes a lot of guilt of just being like, you know, we live in a world where it's not actually that easy to do all these things, and then we've been taught we need to do them all and we really care. So you kind of have like, I feel like this like micro guilt of like just like everyday actions. I'm like, oh, I feel really bad for like throwing that away, or like, oh, and like really shouldn't have done that, and like all these feelings that were kind of would build up within me. And like not buying things, like I like stopped buying new things like for ages, and like I didn't buy myself new shoes for ages because, and I had a foot injury from the shoes, but I was like, I can't buy new shoes because the world is going to end if I buy new shoes. And yeah, it was just quite like intense in terms of the feelings that I had and how much I was putting on myself, like above and beyond. There was kind of like the actions I was doing, but then the like emotional load I was putting on top of that, and top of what I wasn't doing, or wasn't being good enough, or wasn't picking up a piece of litter, or doing other things, was then actually also kind of just made me feel bad in kind of like a daily circumstances. And I think there were a few things that triggered me to really want to focus on this and actually be like, this is like a problem, and I don't want to live life like this. I was kind of like, I don't know where the world's going to be and how long I'm going to live, but I feel like I can't go through life being in this kind of like feeling bad all the time and feeling quite like debilitated and feeling sad about the state of the world. So it kind of really gave me motivation of thinking about the future, and the fact that actually I want to show up for the rest of my life and do what I can to contribute. Was like, well, actually I need to like deal with this emotion and what's happening inside if I want to be able to show up for the world. I always have nieces and nephews who are young, and I was like, I don't want them to feel how I feel this, like, and same for anyone, like I don't want anyone to go through what I felt. And if I could learn the ways to manage the emotions and teach other people to do that. You know, my nieces and nephews could grow up kind of not feeling that emotional guilt and emotional weight, or they had ways to process emotions and process what was happening in the world, then that would be amazing. So I feel like those motivated me to shift and change, and to really focus on it, and to go like deep into it and myself, and figure out a way to kind of work with it, work through it, and learn how to process it.
Thanks, Heather. And we know that many people are feeling that, and like I'm sure there'll be people on this call today that can really relate to the way that you described that. So for the people that are feeling this intense overwhelm and by the climate crisis and all these other crises, and struggle to see how they can make a difference, what are some steps that they can take to move from feeling overwhelmed to taking positive, impactful action?
Yeah, I think, and then, like, it's like I felt overwhelmed like a lot of the time. Like I felt really, like, especially like working in sustainability, I was like, there's so much to do, and like I don't know where to prioritize. So I feel like overwhelm has been big for me. And I think partly is just knowing that you are making a difference is part of it, because everyone here is doing something, and whatever we are doing and the small things, they make a difference. They might not feel it all the time, but it really is focusing on what's in your control and what you can do, and how you can show up for yourself, and how then you can show up for others, and like taking care of yourself so that you can take care of others is really important. And I think what really helped me was knowing, I did a climate change coach course with a company called the Climate Change Coaches, and it's for coaches who are learning how to coach people around climate change who work in it, or to process the feelings of it. And that just made me really realize how we haven't, or they taught us about how we haven't really been equipped to deal with this level of suffering. Like as humans, you know, we were part of tribes for like 200 people, and we could deal with, you know, the grief associated with that. Now we're kind of been exposed, like no one else has really had to go through this like in generations past, where we're dealing with such heavy like predictions about the future, and we have this immense amount of knowledge about the suffering that's happening in the world. Like we have not been trained how to deal with this, so it makes sense that a lot of us, and we store trauma like in a way that like other animals don't. Like we can't just shake it off. Like a lot of this stays with us, so it's like you have to know that this is kind of normal, and this is a valid reaction to what's happening. There was a study, it was 10,000 young people, and I think 45% of them said that their worries about climate change negatively impacted their daily lives. So that's nearly half the amount of people who like daily were feeling worried about this, and it was negatively impacting them. And I think searches for climate anxiety have gone up in the last 5 years by like 5,000% or something. So I think even just knowing you're not alone, and that this is really normal and a totally valid reaction to what's happening, because it is our human nature to care about what's happening in the world. And when we see harm, and our emotions are just messages kind of telling us that something is up, and they're warning us. And so it's just kind of a human instinct. So just, I feel like that, firstly, knowing that it is okay is helpful. And then other steps that I found helpful. One is learning to feel your feelings. And like I didn't really learn how to do this. I never really learned how to name emotions, or I didn't really know the names of emotions. You can Google like climate emotion, you can do the climate emotions wheel, but also just an emotions wheel. And there's like 80 different emotions. And it's really helpful in order to be able to process emotions, to be able to name them and to know what they are, and then to be able to describe them. So if you can name, okay, there is anxiety here, it also helps to like separate the like, I am feeling anxious, because kind of internalizes it in some way, to being like, there is anxiety here. You're kind of disassociating yourself from it somehow. So it's helpful. I find it helpful when I think in that way, like there is anxiety here. And then once you've learned how to label things, it's around locating and describing it in the body. So getting more in touch with the body. And like we've been quite like a taught to be cut off from the head, and we think a lot in the head. So actually tapping into like, okay, when I feel anxiety, like I actually feel butterflies in my stomach, or I feel like this weight like in my throat. Like sometimes I get this like tenseness in my throat, and you can describe the like color. So maybe it's like a black ball or something like this, which something that when I first learned about this stuff, I was like, this I don't know how this makes sense, but like I've done it for a while, and it like it really helps to just bring attention to the emotion and not be stuck in it. Because I think what I did was like resist the emotion, not let it come up, not acknowledge it was there, and it just like what you resist persists. Like it just sits with you and kind of makes things worse. Whereas actually when you are open to it and welcome it, then it can actually like settle it, and you can like respond to it in a much quicker way. And like once you've kind of named it and described it, like there's anxiety here, there is a ball in my throat, or whatever it might be, then welcoming it and kind of breathing into it, and just kind of accepting it as an emotion, as a messenger. And that kind of takes a bit of practice. And if you want to kind of do that, some of these things will work, some they won't. But you kind of practice that when you're not feeling such heightened emotion, so that you can tap into it when you are feeling more. Another is self-love and compassion, and the way that we talk to ourselves, I think, is such an important one, particularly with the second example I was talking about, this feelings of guilt and shame. And like guilt is kind of related to our behavior, like, and it can kind of be helpful to course correct. So you can kind of feel guilty that you didn't pick up that piece of litter, or that you threw that like meal away that you left too late. And you can kind of be like, okay, well, maybe next time I'll do this to change, but like not staying stuck in the guilt. Whereas shame is around actually feeling like you're a bad person, and it's a lot harder to kind of shift that. So getting to know the way that you're talking to yourself, and whether, you know, if you're throwing something away or you're doing something that, you know, you feel bad about, just check the way that you're talking to yourself, and then choose different language, choose kind of language that is more, and this can be for anything in your life. It's been helpful for me for all aspects of my life, but particularly around feeling bad about your contribution, or the impact you're having, or whether you're being sustainable enough, to really be kindness, and to be kind to yourself, and just know that you are doing the best that you can. And like it will give you so much more energy and resourcefulness. Like all this kind of stuff just makes everything a bit less heavy, because we can only do what we can do. So being able to talk to ourselves in that way is really helpful. Gratitude is another one that's really helped me. Is like seeing the good in the world, and really being grateful for what you have. And whether you can do this, like, you know, 3 things you're grateful for a day, like whatever feels feasible to fit in with your life. And also seeking out like good news and talking about the good stuff, and that kind of, it has like a ripple effect. Like when you see more of the good in the world, like you end up seeing more of the good in the world, and more people talk about it. And like there is a lot of focusing on the negatives, particularly in the sustainability space. It's focusing on the negatives and where things are going and what's bad. And actually, I wonder if we create, you know, you kind of create what you put in. So actually, if we're putting in more positive energy and more positive stories and more gratitude, then we kind of create more of that movement. And it also just helps you feel better, and helps you be able to tap into, if you do hear something bad, that you kind of have a bit of more resourcefulness around feeling what's good, or remembering what you have, and what's there for you. And talking about it is also really valuable, whether you can do it with friends or family, go to a climate cafe or an active hope. I'm running a emotional resilience workshop where we'll do this more like an interactive session in a couple of weeks, so you can join that. But there are lots of other people doing things and creating safe spaces where you can talk about it. Another thing that's really helped me is mindfulness, and kind of as a way of being. So whether it's meditating, it helps you to notice your mind and where your mind is going, and being able to see yourself separate from your mind, so that you can actually be like, okay, like you can take a breath and you can choose how to respond. Like there was an example, a while ago, my mum was putting something in the wrong bin, like the normal waste bin rather than the recycling bin. And I was like, no, and like I kind of like shouted it, and then I felt so bad for it. And I was like, and actually mindfulness has helped me to like be able to create that gap. There's like a reaction and then there's a response. And like sometimes the difference between the two can like be a breath. And it's, you're reacting to something. I then was kind of projecting my kind of like fear and like the importance of putting one thing in the right bin, like onto her, and then kind of like that had an impact. And then my family are like, oh yes, which bin should this go in, Heather? And I'm like, oh, like I don't want to have that impact on people. Like I could, if I had the capability to like take a second to be like, oh, actually, I think you can put that in that bin. And like, oh yeah, I just learned about that. Yeah, it was something that's just a lot kinder and a bit more like doesn't project my own like fears onto other people. That's been super helpful. And yeah, doing meditation and being able to kind of be more consciously aware of my thoughts has really helped. And even just the attitudes of mindfulness. I was doing a mindfulness course at the same time I was doing my systems thinking course, and I was like, there's actually a lot of crossover here in like their way of being, like how if you want to be a systems thinker, there's quite a lot of attributes of mindfulness that come into it. So whether it's kind of coming with a beginner's mind, being very open-minded, non-judgmental of people, you accept things the way they are. And that's a big thing for me that has shifted my relationship to what's happening in the world, is this acceptance of like, okay, the world is the way it is, and there's nothing I can do to change it. And I think a lot of the time I spent in like resisting that or resisting doing that, because I was like, it's so bad, like as in like I can't accept that this is okay. And I guess it's not necessarily accepting it's okay, it's just accepting that it is, and like putting energy into resisting something that already is as it is. Like it takes like a lot of this stuff that we're kind of talking about, like even the emotional reactions or resisting stuff or complaining or blaming about stuff, it takes up so much of our energy that we could, like, if we can kind of manage that, then we can use it in such better ways. And like this is all about, you know, transforming eco anxiety to eco action by dealing with this stuff and being better able to manage it. We can then actually have the resources and like the energy and the positivity and like feel more inspired to actually take action and do what we can do to make a difference. And then some other stuff like limiting your exposure to bad news. Like I rarely read the news now, and I'm fine, nothing bad has happened. I feel like we're conditioned to think we must read the news. And also walking in nature really helps. And just being out in nature, appreciating nature, doing things to take action, and whether that's doing some volunteering or just doing something that you know is good for the planet, like all these things can help you feel good, and to feel more resourced and to kind of manage it. But a lot of the first things that I was talking about, they're all kind of practices. They're like this inner stuff, which takes a bit of a practice to do, and like consistency, and like they're not necessarily difficult things to do. They just take a bit of consistent effort, but they're really worth it and have made a huge difference to me and how I've kind of been able to cope and kind of stay in like a more positive headspace.
Thanks, Heather. I can see someone's actually, Lawrence has just said in the chat that they've started reading something called Positive News. And that's actually, I mean, I was going to say, when you were talking about, you know, feeding ourselves with positive things and sustainability that are going on, that's actually something that's brought me a lot more peace and kind of reimagining this better world that we can have through seeing all these success stories. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that one, and that's on a personal level, I found that particularly helpful. So yeah, thanks for your comment as well, Lawrence. And building on addressing the eco-anxiety, how can those feeling frozen by the enormity of it reignite and sustain their motivation for impactful action once they've kind of started on it?
Yeah, I think let yourself feel the emotions and welcome the emotions, and like sometimes it may not feel safe to do that, or it might be too heavy and you may need to work with like a professional on it. There's like the Climate Psychology Alliance or the Climate Coaching Alliance, they're both alliances, I think. They have people who are able to support people through that, and I think just give yourself compassion. Like, we are all just doing our best. And I also think about like our circle of influence, and you can Google it. It's like here we have our circle of influence, and then around it we have our circle of control, then circle of influence, then kind of out of our control. And like everything that's happening in the world, whether it's politics or war or climate change or biodiversity loss, it's outside of our direct control. So putting energy into thinking about that, worrying about it, if you can kind of focus on actually, okay, these are the things that are in control, which is often like you and how you show up and what you do, and what is in your sphere of influence, which is like the people that you're around and who you can impact, like focusing your energy there has also made a massive difference to me, because I used to have this kind of like, I need to save the world, I need to help all these poor people, and it was kind of that mentality is not actually that helpful, because I kind of needed to start with myself, and then focus on the people that are around me, and also changing a bit of my mentality. There's something called the drama triangle in coaching, which is kind of how people relate to different people in relationships. So there's kind of, you can either go into victim mode, which is where you kind of feel like everything's out to get you, or you could go into persecutor mode where you're kind of blaming everyone else, or rescuer mode where you want to kind of, you feel like you've got to save the world. And I feel like I was definitely in that, like I was trying to rescue. And the flip side of that way of thinking is called the empowerment triangle. And the opposite of a rescuer is a coach. And it's like learning those coaching skills of believing that everyone has exactly what they need inside of them. Like, people have the resources and the ability to do exactly what they want to do, and they can reach their highest potential. And actually being a coach and supporting people in that way enables people to reach their full potential, and kind of you believe in the best of people, and that people, they're okay, and you're just kind of there as to help them to reach and become their true selves. And that's been a really powerful shift for me to kind of realize that, and also to like focus on myself first. And even becoming a coach just means I need to do a lot of work and support on myself and working with other people. And then I think the other thing I was thinking about was around our nervous system, when you were talking about kind of that frozen. And I've been learning more about this now. I don't know if other people have been learning about nervous system, but it kind of sits at the root of everything, like having a dysregulated nervous system, then our emotions sit on top of it. And actually, if we can work on regulating our nervous system, which you can kind of do through techniques like breathing, or there's some things like where you can tap the body or touch the body, like all these things kind of calm you down, or you go for a walk in nature, or you dance, or you kind of pet your dog, or like cuddle your children, whatever it might be. These things that kind of calm down your nervous system are so powerful, because a lot of what we do and have taught to do, and like they're all just ways of coping, but we kind of mask the real dysregulation that's underneath. So we can do things, and we kind of are trying to mask a bit of what's happening. And actually what's happening, if you get to the root cause of it and actually think about like, okay, how can I actually regulate my nervous system? It's kind of going into fight or flight or freeze. And like I spent a lot of time in freeze, where I was just in overwhelm and I didn't really know what to do. And actually, if I learn to just kind of regulate, then I kind of can manage a lot better what's happening. And I think, and then lastly, I would just say just about focusing more on being in the present moment. And this, I have the tendency to like go into the future and think about the future and worry about it, and actually being more in the present and knowing that like the present moment is all we ever have is just really freeing. And it just releases a whole load of things that are completely out of my control. Spending my time thinking about the future or worrying about the past or thinking about what other people might think, or like thinking about not being good enough, like whatever it might be, whether it's in relation to yourself or relation to the world or what might happen in the future, it's being more in the present moment is so impactful and just makes you feel so much better and just more capable of kind of doing stuff, and you just feel more energized and able to show up in however you want to show up.
Thanks, Heather. I'm just keeping an eye on time. I think we have time for one or two more questions, and then we'll open it up to the questions that have been coming through in the Q&A and chat. So could we, maybe kind of moving on to more career focused side of things. As many people look for a career that does reflect their own values and does contribute to a better world, what advice could you give them for aligning their personal beliefs with professional aspirations?
Yeah, I think getting to know what your values are is a great place, like what is important to you. And there's different ways you can do this. There's values lists on the internet, so you could go through them and pick out the ones that are there. You could also, sometimes when I coach people on this, it's like you think about your peak experience, or like when has been like the time in your life where you just felt like amazing, like what was happening, what was around, like were you with family, were you on an adventure, were you feeling free, was there something to do with someone you loved, like all that stuff. You get to kind of uncover what's important, and then think about like, how are you living in line with your values now? Like how would someone know that you were living a life aligned with your values, and what might you do to live more aligned with your values is a really helpful exercise. And then I also think understanding your strengths and what you're good at. I remember doing part of the leadership course I mentioned, I did a strengths finder test, which was great. And I was like, all my skills are in like developing people and so like supporting people. And I was like, I'm in a role where it's mainly influencing, and none of my skills were in influencing, like when I was in sustainability lead. And I was like, maybe this is why like I don't quite feel aligned, because I'm not playing to my strengths. So I think really understanding what you're good at then makes everything so much easier, because then you're doing what you're good at. And I think sometimes people think, you kind of think, I need to like have a really impactful job, or I need to change everything and go work in like something that's really purpose-led or mission focused. But if it doesn't align with your values and your strengths, then you don't think you'll thrive in it. So like, I feel like understanding those two is really helpful. And then understanding a bit of what you care about in the world. Like there's so many things that you might want to focus on and issues that might be important to you. Kind of having one, or thinking about where you want to contribute, is also helpful. And then challenging your beliefs and the things that are holding you back. So like people can often feel like stuck or overwhelmed, or like, I'm not quite sure where to go. And sometimes behind that is like a strong inner critic, or like a belief that I'm not good enough, or a belief that like I'll never get that job. Like we have all these beliefs inside of us which we might not be conscious of, but they're actually holding us back. And this is a lot of what we do in coaching, is to like get into kind of like, okay, well, what are the narratives, and like, do we need to believe them? Are they true? And like, how do you work through them? Because that often we're kind of getting in our own way. I find it's like just a kind of getting out of your own way so that you can actually live a life that is meaningful for you. And I think also like finding space where you can be more authentic and be more yourself is also kind of what the world needs, and also makes everyone feel better. Like personally, like if you're being more true to yourself, then you feel better, and everyone around you, I feel like that ripples to everyone around you as well.
Thanks, Heather. And just realised we've got about 5 minutes left till the end of the scheduled webinar. So do you want to ask one more question, a little bite-sized one for people before we open up the question to our audience? So could you share maybe one resource or recommendation to leave our audience with to help them take their first steps from eco-anxiety to action?
Yeah. I'm going to write a blog about it. So if you'd like to, like, with all this stuff, because I appreciate I just like shared a lot. So you can read that. There's lots of other great stuff online. I would say like choose something that kind of resonated with you and make it small and make it manageable and commit to it however you feel able to do. And just start building up a practice of something, whether it's a meditation practice, whether it's a gratitude practice, whether it's a, okay, I'm going to notice like my thoughts and when I talk like negatively to myself around sustainability and switch that and just make a commitment to do that. I think just trying to do something, take away like an action that you feel like can be sustainable and that you can build on.
Love that. I feel like that's a nice, like, kind of digestible, like easy to access first step. So I think that's, yeah, pretty useful, I'm sure, for many people here. So going to open up the floor to some questions that have come through in the Q&A and the comments. So we have a question from Michelle for you, Heather. So how can you engage community groups with limited government funding, thinking of asset-based community development?
How can you engage them in eco-anxiety?
I guess I'm going to assume that's yes. It's yeah, I mean, we might be able to, I don't know if Michelle's here, we might be able to.
Yes, feel free to chip in, Michelle, if you want to just interesting what you want to engage them on.
I'm not sure if we can see it in the chat function. Or we could, if we're waiting to hear back from that, we could maybe go to Leah's question. So Leah's asked, so you spoke about your career journey and wanting to be closer to the ground. Do you think you are now? And when do you feel like you're having the greatest impact?
Yeah, nice question. Yeah, I feel much closer to it now because I'm working directly with people and you can kind of see a transformation. And what was the last part of the question, sorry?
The last part was, do you think you are now? Yeah, and when do you feel like you are having the greatest impact?
I guess I've tried to let go of like having a really big impact or having the greatest impact. I found it quite a hard thing to kind of measure myself against and kind of so yeah, I'm not quite sure, but I kind of feel like for me it's like my way of being feels like is the way that makes an impact. So the more work I put into kind of being more me, focusing on what like aligns with me and kind of doing the work that really matters to me, and like, you know, I've shifted kind of what I do to do that, has made the biggest impact because then you know, that trickles out to everything else and has a kind of ripple impact.
Heather, also didn't mean to raise my hand there.
You might have
Anyway, so I think we have time for just one final question before we wrap up. So someone said, part of my overwhelm comes from feeling like other people aren't doing things quickly enough. What are some things that I can do to help encourage others want to contribute to change too?
Yeah, I struggle with this a lot because I feel like you want to like tell people and just like like you feel bad about other people's actions. My approach to it now is kind of demonstrating and modeling the change and modeling it in a joyful way. So rather than kind of being like, you know, being more sustainable and having more sustainable lifestyle is a hassle or an effort or I'm making a sacrifice to do it or it's difficult, I've shifted my mindset and my way of thinking to be like, it's amazing to do this and like I love that I get to do this and like, you know, like eating vegetarian, like I talk about how great eating vegetarian is, like I've got an EV, I talk about how amazing that is when people are like, oh, the charger, I'm like, oh, it's so amazing, like I just, or like not flying as much, I'd start talking about like how amazing more local holidays are, like, and I feel like we will get further if we're inspiring people and people see the joy in us of doing these things, because then they'll be like, oh, that looks fun. Whereas if I feel like we come from quite a fear or shame-based or judgment-based stuff, which like we kind of are feeling ourselves, then other people can feel that, and I don't feel like it's so attractive for them to do that. You know, if they don't have the same level of care and motivation or awareness that we do, then I kind of feel like you need that like inspiration, like the joyfulness to move to inspire more people to act. But other people have other views, then do share.
I love that. Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of been woven throughout this talk all about the positivity. I mean, it's not toxic positivity, but you know, actually talking about the enjoyment that you're getting from it is infectious. So yeah, I love that. And just to kind of wrap up the last one, so Michelle has actually got back to say for the question that was asked before, how can you engage community groups with limited local government funding? And yeah, in regards to helping them overcoming their anxiety, how to encourage groups to participate in eco activities, especially with mental health, well-being, developing nature interconnectedness. So sounds like that's kind of within community groups as well as those like on an individual basis, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think you're doing like climate cafes, like I run climate cafes. I think there are templates online. I do it with my local like climate action group. And that's a really powerful way to get people together. I'm setting up doing nature walks and kind of bringing in like a bit of mindfulness and just connecting people back to nature. I have one on Sunday if anyone wants to come in Surrey. And so you could organize something like that where people connect to it, or just we do the place I live, people do wildlife walks and nature walks, and they offer them free for people. So again, it depends on volunteering, and there might be funding for it, like Force of Nature. I'm not sure if they fund things like this. They have a good template for a climate cafe, and yeah, or even just holding space for people to talk about this can be so powerful. Like just creating like a circle and just being like, come and just talk about it is also really powerful, because when people can share, it really lightens the load. Like a lot of us are kind of keeping a lot of it inside, and actually when you share it really helps. So even just kind of doing things like that is helpful for people.
Great. Thanks, Heather. I think, I'm sorry, there's a couple of other questions that have come through, but we're not going to have time to go through them today. Sorry about that. However, we will, we're going to send you some links in a moment. So if you've still got some questions, I'm sure you can connect with one of us through that. So yeah, just like to say thank you so much, Heather. That's been such an inspiring, insightful session. I loved hearing about kind of how we can process our emotions and kind of moving through them, as well as, you know, the acceptance of kind of what's going on and not trying to take be kind of letting go of the control of, kind of just being able to let go of control rather than trying to take on everything that's going on around us. And yeah, as I said, I'm sure after that, many of you would love to connect with Heather. So Heather does offer coaching to impact professionals who are feeling stuck or overwhelmed and want to feel happier and more fulfilled and more empowered to make meaningful impact. And she also runs workshops, like she said, and delivers talks for organisations around emotional resilience, inner work and systems thinking. And yeah, she'd be really happy to connect with you. So I think, as you can see, Sarah's added a whole load of links there. So you can connect with Heather via LinkedIn, send her an email, subscribe to her newsletter, or join one of her events. She's got 2 coming. One is this Sunday, which is the Conscious Change Makers Walk on the 5th of May, and an emotional resilience workshop, which she mentioned earlier, on the 16th of May. And for anyone inspired by today's discussion and looking to start on their own journey of personal and professional development to help contribute to meaningful change, the On Purpose Associate Programme is currently open for applications, and you can find more information on our website at onpurpose.org. It's there in the chat function. And also connect with us on LinkedIn and Instagram if you just search for On Purpose London. The deadline for applications is the 21st of May. And that's about it from myself and Heather. I'm just going to pass back over to Hilary in a moment. But just again, a massive thank you to Heather for really, generously sharing your time, your expertise and insights with us, and to Hilary for co-hosting and to Escape the City. And also thank you to everyone who's joined us today. So I'll pass back to Hilary.
Thank you, Josie. All the thank yous. And thank you, Heather. I really echo what you just said, Josie. So insightful and so many things to go away and think about. And I mean, especially around like managing your emotional load and kind of how to turn that emotion into positive action. I feel really privileged to be able to bring your knowledge, Heather, to the Escape audience. And I feel really confident that it will have lit a fire inside many of those who have tuned in today. So thank you. And for anyone who is looking for a purposeful role, or one where you can focus on the natural world, whether that's through sustaining it or regenerating it, do check out escapethecity.org for our jobs board, as we've got lots of sustainability focused roles on there. Back to you, Josie. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us. We're going to end the webinar there. We'll also send around the recording, so for anyone who wants to watch it again, share it with anyone. We'll be